By choice or circumstance, at this time of our lives, a lot of us find ourselves at crossroads and ended relationships. What have we learned? And how do we move on and take those learnings with us in the next phase? That's today on our second act. Jeanne, thank you again for coming back and joining us for one more segment here on emotional health and how we move on at this stage of our lives. For many reasons, we've all dealt with ended relationships. What do we learn? What do we take? What are the messages?
Yeah. Well, we often do find ourselves alone when we don't expect to or want to be, or maybe it's something we've planned for a long time, but it's still a very sad thing when it does happen. And I think one of the things that can make the transition a lot smoother is, instead of focusing on what did we do wrong, why are we bad for this having happened, or what are the fears, to focus on what the gifts are that we got from those experiences, because they're always there.
So how do you mean gifts?
Well,
an ended marriage, what's the gift?
It may seem kind of like a paradox to think in terms of a gift, a divorce coming in a gift box, Right. But the fact is, we've learned a lot about ourselves. We may have had to exercise parts of ourselves that we didn't know were there in order to make this transition. We may have had to learn how to live on our own in ways that we hadn't before. We may have had to experience becoming a different kind of person in order to make this transition in our life.
Yeah. Well, I know from personal, experience, I've stopped certain behaviors that I didn't like about myself in certainly the last few years of my marriage. So is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's a very good example. You may find, for instance, that you realize certain things in your previous relationship didn't work. It doesn't help to keep nagging at somebody to do something that they're obviously not going to do. Maybe to focus instead on what he or she is doing in the relationship. And that could make it a lot better, instead of having that same fight over and over again. Maybe to start looking at building your own strengths and making yourself somebody who can handle certain household affairs, or can handle going out and working a party by yourself, or being able to be the one to take the initiative in the sexual relationship, instead of waiting for somebody to come to you.
Well, that's a really good point. There is growth that comes out of loss.
Yes, and I know when I went through my own loss, it was not something I had chosen or was expecting, but I learned a lot about myself and my own resilience and my own ability to build new relationships, make new friends, learn how to do things that I had never done before. And I do value those gifts. That those were things that all made me a better, stronger person to bring to my next relationship.
So what you're saying is we have a choice of just falling apart and feeling sorry for ourselves.
No, that's part of it. That's one choice you have, although it's not going to take you very far.
Right, and really looking and growing from. It is that can be a gift. It's maybe some of them are a little backhanded, but but they absolutely can be.
But that's when the biggest growth experiences in your life happens. There's an expression they use in gardening called distressing a plant, when you cut it way back and that makes it shoot up, and that you have to distress it if you want to see that growth. And I think sometimes of that same thing happening in our personal lives, that we get very distressed, and that's when the biggest growth shoots come out.
That is a great analogy. I love that. Thank you, Jeanne. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for your insight. We'll start shooting and growing and counting the gifts.
Okay.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Okay.